Dimp Digital presents Idle Game Chat.
Cool.
Here we are then, Idle Game Chat back in your life. You've got Apps and Logan here to take you through some game impressions. And that's all we do now. This is actually the first fresh recording since Logan walked away from the news style podcast. It didn't happen. Since we changed the system, so haven't thought up of a new slick intro yet. For when we're just opening with a game and closing with a game, so
I'd never say news is closed.
It's just fucking boring, though, isn't it? Look, just for old time's sake, this is what we could have been speaking about.
Yeah,
Microsoft CEO committed to meeting players where they are after Xbox games dominate PlayStation Store. Who gives a fuck?
I saw some interesting news the other week, and now I can't remember it. But there was a lot of stuff going on around about with Microsoft, and they're still rumbling around. And I'm always concerned that it turns into the Microsoft rumour mill. But I'd like to. I think if we did something where we wrapped up like the news of the month, or we went through the bullshit, but then the problem is saying on the first of the month is completely largely irrelevant 30 days later. So it's like, how do you do it? But
it's the same. Some people say it's the same with the games. Like you go, why are you reviewing an 8-year-old game? It's like, wow, it's true, but it's more.
But the game's still the same. Like the game can move on, but a piece of news and rumor and innuendo largely isn't gonna. Could change, should we say, to the next one. I mean, most of the time we find ourselves fucking contradicting what we said last. I say contradicting what I claimed last week with whatever's come out. But
one thing I noticed that I was just my effort levels in searching out the news was just dropping week by week. So
you're scrambling around, sometimes not for filler, but sometimes it's like if it's a quiet week, you go, well, what do you do? And that's where it becomes tricky. But
exactly. And so now it's just a game. Well, I mean, I don't know actually. I mean, if something like this, if and when the Switch 2 comes out, probably next year now, that'll probably get its own bumper episode with people that have got one. The PS5
GTA 6
Pro,
preview episodes, all these sorts of things.
There's other stuff that can happen, but mostly it will be one video game, maybe two, depending on what's happening, and that's your lot. And what that does mean, they've been warned the audience that the weekly cadence will eventually drop. Now, we're fortunate at this time, this time next week, it'll be bank holiday, so it would have been off anyway. But after that, it could be once every 2 weeks, it might be once a month, it might even go several months. Because one of the problems I've got is I'm sitting there playing Final Fantasy Rebirth still. In April, it'll be May before I get through that. I reckon it'll be nearly June if I'm not careful. I mean, the last 15%, it reckons, that PlayStation. It gives you a little flag and says, like, you're on, I think, on 86%. I'm like, well, I feel like I've got a chapter or two left, but it's a big game. 80-odd hours plundered into that. So with that sort of level of game coming out, that size, that slowness, there's never a chance of keeping up weekly. But
and there's not a lot of other stuff, I would say, really out there. I think we said at the beginning of the year, when we're doing like all the gaming predictions and when we're trying to do the FGL and the Grand Prix and stuff, there was like a couple of obvious things, but beyond that, there was no kind of like game after game after game of obvious things that a lot of us would be jumping into. And I think that's kind of turned out to be the case, where obviously you've got a ream of stuff because your tastes vary so greatly. I mean, you'll basically play everything and anything. Like, there's nothing that's ever really off the cards for you. Whereas things like horror and various other things are just not of interest to me. So it is a tricky one.
I can never keep up with what I would like to play. There's definitely Dragon's Dogma 2. I've had to skip over Persona 3 Reload for now. But I will get back to them. It's just that I'm not as interested in playing things day one. Maybe like 2 or 3 games a year. The rest will be old tutters that I perhaps should have been playing earlier in the year, or maybe got a bit of DLC, or who knows. But it's never easy to keep up with. All that to say is that don't be expecting these weekly because they can be kept up. I can't complete a game a week. Like, Adkins starts stuff and drops stuff more than he finishes. You're largely distracted with multiplayer efforts, unless I can get a real sniffer under your nose. And I just want people to play what they want to play. I don't want this fucking forced, go and play 6 Don't Nod games or 6 Telltale games, so we've got 6 weeks worth of content. It ain't working like that anymore. It's 2024, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, I mean...
10 years in the job. It's time to change. Put even less effort in.
Well, I think it's morphed throughout the years, and obviously, personally, we all have various different levels of things going on outside of this. As I say, this is for all of us and a side activity, and it's always difficult. And I think now more than ever, there's less collective time available that works for everyone. And I think it's always going to be the same as largely as you get older and things happen and whatnot. But it is tricky to keep that going to the same level. And sometimes it just depends as well what games are out. I mean, obviously with the final shape out, that will distract Hall and various others for a period of time because they will 100% play it. And there's just not... There's a group of other people that are just stuck still in that Warzone rut and various other... Like, there's not a lot that's like bringing us all together. There was, as you said, the Great Unifier, which I think might neatly bring us on to perhaps... I mean, we know why we're here. The actual audience technically knows why we're here anyway, because it's in the fucking title. But they don't know that right now, and we don't know it. But the Great Unifier come along, and that's been one of the unexpected... events, I should say, of the year so far for me. Yes,
it is Helldivers 2.
Sorry, I've kind of taken the intro there out of your hands and
I'd have been carrying on about telling people why they don't agree a weekly episode for another 15 minutes. It needs to be get on with. But Helldivers 2, Arrowhead Games, published by Sony. You don't own Arrowhead yet, potentially. We'll see in the future what comes of that. But it felt like this was something that was on the periphery for me. I had an eye on it. It looked good in the trailers, but I've seen many games look good in trailers and then come out and it's just a shit show. And then when it came out, reviews were pretty decent. The buzz was good. And I jumped in, and 100 hours later, we're staring down the barrel of this. Platinum trophy to boot. So that's been ticked off. Old level cap hit. I think they've doubled it. I think we were saying earlier. It's up to 100 now. Got to 50. Didn't get every single unlock, ship module unlock, which we'll talk about later on, but vast majority of those. And it really did have a white hot streak, but in full transparency, is absolutely fallen off probably in the last 6 weeks, I'd say, as a group anyway. There was a time when it was, I daren't say daily, but it was close to that. There was always someone playing it seems, at all various times of the days and weekends. Like sometimes it was like we ain't got room for everyone. People getting splintered off into the Hicksons Society being cut out of party chats and whatnot. Going back to Overwatch.
Well, I'm pretty sure, didn't we? It wasn't the voice channel for Helldivers limited to max party size. So it's like if there's 4 in there, you couldn't have a 5th or a 6th because it was. That's it. It's kind of like you can see there's a full team, and then you can jump in if there was a gap.
That was the option also on PlayStation for Overwatch. But whoever set up the parties, which wasn't me, never used to use it. So you'd get the 7th member in there, and then you'd all be staring at each other, going, "Well, this don't work, does it? Someone's got to go, or it gets cut in half."
My view, and not everyone shares it, right? And I don't know if everyone thinks that way, but if I see there's people,
you ever turn the coffee pot on and forget you've put it on, and then you have to keep going back and miss? That's what I've just done there. And then I've forced the issue to have the mug because I haven't had one today, and it weren't warm enough.
I quite frequently have to, and I don't like microwaved or reheated coffee. It doesn't ever taste the same. But sometimes I'll make a pot and then go and forget about it and come back to it. And it's cold, and I'm like, well. There's 3/4 of a pot of coffee there. I can't just tip that down the drain really with a clear conscience. So I end up drinking 2 cups of that. But it's a problem. But yeah, the whole party size issue thing, some people don't give a shit. They'll just wait and in that party and they're sitting there talking to you about their game and you're sitting there thinking, like, if you, it just makes it a bit weird and awkward, I think, because then everyone else feels bad that you've kind of got someone that's on the periphery, but no one wants to give up their spot.
Well, one evening, I don't know if he was there. This was in the second week the game was out when it had awful server capacity issues.
Yeah.
I think 2 or 3 of us got in, 2 didn't, and we were obviously playing. Those of us that got in, the 2 that didn't weren't playing, but they went off and played their own game. Then they were moaning that we were being too noisy. I was like, well, we're playing the fucking game. Like, you don't have to sit in here and listen to it. And eventually they left. But they got all stroppy about it. It's Hall and fucking Dave getting pissy about it.
Yeah.
Going all noisy in this party. Go, we're fucking playing.
Yeah, there's a lot of carnage going on here. Like,
I can't help you if you didn't get in that queue early enough.
It is awkward though, and it's like that, and it is one of those things, but largely combated these days by the wonderful Discord, just going, right, maximum of this, everyone else gets cut, and if you see a slot, you can jump in. Yeah,
that's the way to do it. Really handy that the PlayStation and Xbox have that Discord integration as well, because I know my mic was awful because I was using the Pulse headset from PlayStation, but again, I'm like, get over it. Like, you can hear what I'm saying. You don't need this level of quality. It's not a fucking podcast, for goodness sake.
No, it's not necessary. But even, it has to be said, like, even when I use like this headset mic, or PB's using his, and it's via Discord, like, it's just such superior quality. But it does help, obviously, being able to connect it all up and stuff. But it was a little bit of early. I think obviously in the early days, everyone's sort of like jumping on and doesn't want to be left out, and there's a lot of eagerness to get on. And then I think as time goes on, it kind of leveled out a little bit. Like, you generally jumped on like late doors with Dave and stuff, and I was sort of early evening-ish time or whatever. Like, and everyone kind of found their good little slot, and sometimes it all come together. But I think everyone in the end got the crack at it that they wanted to whenever they did.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Dave got all the achievements as well, so the equivalent on Steam, the platinum trophy. But that's kind of Helldivers 2 early on. In terms of cards on the table, I suppose there's a couple of things to call out. I played it on the PS5. I think Adkins also played it on the PS5, but most other people that I played with were on PC, including yourself.
Yeah.
Played it on that old Steam. What was it, 35 UK pounds? I think I got it for. I didn't buy the Super Citizen Edition. I know a few of the lads did that, which unlocked one of the premium war bonds, which is basically their battle pass. And again, we'll get into that later on. But you were on the PC, and you're using mouse and keys. Yes. How did you get on with that? Because my view is anything third person, I'll pick up a controller on that PC. I don't care what people think. I ain't dealing with that mouse and keyboard. And this has, let's say, some unique gameplay mechanics from the way you have to input those stratagem codes and whatnot. So it probably took a bit of fiddling to get that right.
Yeah, well, I guess the only reason I didn't get this on PlayStation is because I don't have the PlayStation set up in this room. The PlayStation's downstairs, and I largely will only ever use that for first-person game, like solo games, should I say, like one players. There's no hard and fast rule, but I was like, it seems like the sort of game that I can just play with my mouse and keys, and it's something that I want to kind of do more if it makes sense to, and just sort of go mouse and keys. I mean, I've spent the money on this PC, right? I might as well make the most of it where I can. So yeah, I picked it up on here, and I largely found it good. Like, because there is some first person with the guns as well. Like, you can alternate between third and first when you're aiming down sight. So it kind of made sense for that. But like 80%, 90% of the game, you are third person. It was fine. But definitely those stratagems and trying to run and keys, and like there's some gymnastics that need to be done. And largely I had to stand still whenever I'm doing the stratagems, because there's no other way I could really figure out of making my brain work to do it.
Yeah, it was nicely set up on the controller from my side. Like, even the stratagems, you could run around and input them.
Was that did you have to do like arrow? Was it like on the D-pad?
Yeah,
So
it's all muscle memory. I think I have to hold L1 and then you input the D-pad code, and then but you still have full functionality of your other buttons. It's a little bit of a gymnastics of your hands, but it's doable. And it's also very easy to change like the firing rate, turn your torch on and off. I know some people on the PC had a few issues with what key that was bound to, because it may have not even been bound to start with, or was bound to something that was being used. But largely, I don't think there was much difference between the two, other than obviously you've got a better looking game. I've seen the side by sides; it looks better, but ran okay on the PS5. There's sometimes when it went really crazy, it would drop its frames. I don't know if you ever had that on your PC, but
I mean, it wasn't absolutely wasn't the smoothest. Largely, like during gameplay, it's fine. Other than mainly the frame drops come loading in the level or loading out of it, but generally throughout when you're playing, it was fine.
Yeah.
And on my rig, I'd probably expect that. I'd be disappointed if that wasn't the case, right?
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. In terms of what type of game this is, so it's online co-op only. There's no PvP. You can play it solo, but you can't stop someone on your friends list joining your game. You can turn the matchmaking from public to friends only, yet still, if you've got people on your friends list, they can still join. So it's not really... most people will leave you alone, I think. I don't know. I didn't used to. I used to jump into people's games all the time. I should say that. But yeah, it's definitely made to be co-op multiplayer. Is it an extraction shooter? Has that extraction bit at the end? But
I'd say because those samples get left behind.
Yeah.
So the aim is to extract them samples as well. There's kind of like there's main mission and B mission and C mission, really, which is C I'd say would be get them samples out.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we frame it like that, a sort of co-op extraction shooter, PvE only, what's, if any, experience have you had in that sort of realm? Because a lot of the stuff you tend to play is usually PvP. The closest thing I can get to is... Well, and then you lose but the Division is more of a story-based game. You've got the Dark Zone, which has the extraction element, but you've got other players that can kill you. I mean, they can kill you in this, but it's friendly fire. But I don't know if you've ever... I know Warzone had like a PvE.
I ain't touching that
type to didn't it?
I think I played about one game of that. Everyone just went no. I haven't really played anything like this, like for like. Obviously, like online co-op, like Overwatch or whatever, was a co-op shooter, but that was PvP. So like co-op PvE, there's nothing obvious that springs to mind, but zombies maybe back in the day is about as close as it kind of
does
gets.
Scratch that itch, or like a Left 4 Dead, which was more level based, but still, yeah.
And this is kind of like a co-op horde mode, really. I mean, it's a lot of things rolled into one, which I think is why it was so attractive for the majority of us, was because it ticks a lot of different boxes, and obviously ultimately, really, the likeness to Starship Troopers, I think, is what attracted a lot of people, was that kind of tongue-in-cheek vibe about it. And but there's a lot about it that is attractive, right? But there's not a lot out there that scratches, as you say, this specific itch.
No, remembering back, actually, it was difficult to get people on board, because originally it was me and Adkins, and that first weekend you got it, and you were in the wings.
Jumping in. I wasn't. So my perspective on this, and I saw this quite early on, was because there's no real matchmaking, and it was obvious that the benefit of this comes from playing in a party, right? So I was like, I don't want to be jumping out there and sort of be trying. I don't like to be the person that's like going, come on this game. I needed other people to show, arguably, that they were in on it before me. So you and Adkins were like straight on it, and I was like, right, well, that's two. So I've got two people. Adkins can't be trusted.
No. It's 1.5, really, isn't it?
So you got 1.5, and I was like...
I wouldn't trust me either, so it's 1. if you're lucky.
Well, I thought if you like it, I know you'll be good for it. So I was like, "There's it," and if you're not, then I won't probably like it anyway. So I was like, I'll see where you sit with it, and then I think Hall was like, I've got it, and I was like, right, well, if Hall's in there, you're there. I think Dave was in the wings, but I was like, we've kind of got enough here now, showing it enough interest to make it a viable option. Because I was like, really, we need 3. If there's 5 definites, you're in trouble because there's people that are getting cut and there's too much competition. So there was a sweet spot essentially initially where you were like, right, we've got enough here now to be doing this.
Yeah. No, it wasn't easy to get people on board. But they did eventually. Like I kept getting the fucking Steam link for Starship Troopers early access thrown back in my face. I was like, I ain't. No, just don't trust. I felt like saying trust me, but I've got no real sway when it comes to multiplayer. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I was like, this looks. I just knew it was going to be better than that.
Though, really. It's not. Well, it's not like competitive multiplayer. It's more of it's just a co-op single player experience, really, which is a weird way of putting it. But there's no real competition between what you're doing in there. It's literally just you. Like I'd say working together as a team, but I'd say there's very little of that goes on anyway. So,
well, yeah.
Once
you get to the higher levels, then it's it's carnage. But
yeah.
But no, yeah. Well, it's good that we got peoplings. I think genuinely everyone enjoyed when it was on its hot streak. You mentioned about how the game's. I daren't call it a narrative, but just the setting of the game, how they set it up. It is very Starship Troopers satire. You're essentially part of the Helldivers kind of crew, which is like a super military for Super Earth, and it's seemingly some level of fascist dictatorship that's presenting itself as a democratic kind of planet.
Or democracy.
Yeah, like there's 2 enemy types. There's the bots and there's the bugs, as we like to call them. And you're essentially the background noise on the bug side of things is you're essentially wiping them out to use their innards as oil and stuff like that. So it's positioned as something else, but all the refueling and whatnot is by killing bugs. So that's kind of you're going planet by planet, destroying them all and taking. There's all this weird stuff going on, but
you're playing yourself as the good guys. Like you're exterminating.
It's all propaganda. It's all tongue in cheek. Yeah, it's really well done. It's funny a lot of the time. Even the Helldivers themselves, the way they will scream "Sweet liberty" and "For freedom," all this sort of stuff. They're all indoctrinated by it, and you can find little lore bits if you walk around on the planets and read the little iPads that are left. There's a pocket of resistance going on as like a little undercurrent. So I don't know if that will play into a future story, but what I liked about the story or the narrative was they set the table. It's very, you said, tongue in cheek. You don't have to take it seriously, and then you can do what you like. You can choose any planet within reason. They do restrict the number of planets open at any time. But they'll put out like a side daily quest if that's working, which it is now. But there was definitely a time that wasn't working, where it's like kill 50 enemies with this weapon, you'll get a reward for that. But then on the other side of things, there's like what they call like a main campaign or a main scenario, and this is essentially a community goal that hopefully you and everyone else who's playing the game focus on and get towards the end of, and at the end everyone gets a nice reward. If you fail, then it doesn't really do anything. They just change the direction of what the quote-unquote story is, and it's kind of a nice little hook to direct you towards perhaps trying different mission types or going after the bots rather than just the bugs, or vice versa. But it wasn't in your face like, look, you need to be doing this. It's not that important, really. You can still just go off and do what you like. So you can kind of just dip in and dip out of that. Yeah. There is like an ongoing narrative going on, but it's not really in your face. There's no cutscenes. There's no characters talking. It's just messages that come through the terminal or in the game. And also, I linked up our Discord with their dispatch notes, which seemed to annoy people eventually. But that essentially gives you like a background of what's going on. It's not like a Destiny where there's a campaign to finish and people get left behind. Again, why I liked it. There's no real. If I want to take a night off, it didn't matter. There was nothing to miss. There was no like, oh, you're going to be under leveled, or you're going to miss this strike, which means you've got to go and do the strike on your own so you can catch up, so we can do the raid later. There's none of that nonsense. It's like every session's sort of afresh. You're sort of like, we're going to do this, this, and that, and you're off. But what did you make of this light touch sort of style of just setting the table for people and going, off you go? There is community goals going on. There is an ongoing narrative and a story of Super Earth versus bugs and bots, but you don't have to pay attention to it. If you want to, there's something there for you, and it's not exactly groundbreaking.
I like it. So I think the great thing, if you like, about this game was that, to your point, it's jump in and out. Like there's no, you can play it, you can enjoy it. There's no like, there is a meta, right? Like there's a meta of guns and setups and things, but they're relatively easy to access, right? It's not, anything is pretty much viable if you want to play the game in a certain way. And I think that's the great part of it, is that there's no particular enforced grind to go and do things. You can kind of just, and you can build how you want to build. I mean, I kind of feel like the game forces you to use certain things by the nature of it. And as the difficulty ramps up, you have to. So like as we referenced, like the problem sometimes is just volume. Like as they've updated the game, it's like the sheer volume of bugs, for example, like forces you to have something that can deal with large numbers of bugs. Like so the mission types and the enemies kind of define what you need to use. But I guess my overriding thoughts are that it's great to be able to jump in and out, but that does affect its shelf life. Like you have fun when you're playing it, but like most games, you need a purpose, or you're working towards something, an end goal. And I kind of feel like without a defined end goal in game, as individuals, we set our end goal or not. So for you, it might have been a level to unlock certain things, to hit a certain point or whatever it is. But it's kind of like you go round in circles, you do one of the community events, you do X amount of dailies, you unlock X amount in the war bonds, you unlock everything in the ship. Like at some point you go, why am I still doing this? Like, because it is a circle, a repetitive circle, right? You kind of clear one war bond down or whatever, you get the guns and you liberate a planet, and then another one needs liberating, and it feels a bit rinse and repeat, which is fine. That's what the game is. But I think its free format and loose style plays to its benefits and its drawback, which I really do think, it's great. We can jump in, we can do what we want with whoever we want, and it's fine. But like, we all got to a point, I think, where we're at a similar stage where we nearly maxed out our levels. We got kind of the guns. We did a lot of the mission types. We did some of the, and then we go, so why am I playing this? Beyond the fact that it's enjoyable, which is a reason to play a game, but most games are enjoyable, right? I enjoy playing Grand Theft Auto. I enjoy playing loads of different games, but why am I continuing? Why did I stop playing Grand Theft Auto? Like, why did I stop? Well, at some point you lose a purpose or something to work towards. And I think that's ultimately what happened perhaps with this, where it kind of hit this really high peak and then almost just as easily fell off the radar.
I don't even remember there being a discussion.
What, around?
Or even a rejection.
No.
It just stopped. People just stopped playing it. Like, it was not like we all went, you had enough of this. It's like, we'll give it a rest for a few weeks. Just like one day, one of us didn't go in.
Yeah.
Then the next, and then after that, it became like a week went by, and I was like, oh, that might well be it. And I would occasionally, as I said, once a week jump in and do maybe one community major order or contribute to that, because you can't tick it off. Again, that's what I like. You didn't have to tick it off yourself. You didn't have to contribute, but I like to try and contribute to the major orders. It give you like 0.001%, and I was like, that'll do.
I've ticked it over.
I've given something to the war effort there, but then eventually it was like, oh, no one's even on it. No one's jumped on for 2-3 weeks, and then no one really came back in and said, you fancy giving it a go, or I'm done with this. It just sort of silently died off, and that was it. And it's not been spoken about since. And what I get now is people moaning about the Discord notifications.
I love the way that you use this as a way to send out messages to the wider group.
Don't be crying. I don't have to turn it off. If you think I'm going to spend time working it out, I ain't going to. It's there now. You have to mute it. It's not doing any harm, is it?
Which is what he did. It's a bit of a strange one in that no one went, "This is shit," innit? Or there was no. Like using Warzone as an example, that died because they updated it and ruined it, and everyone went, There was a moment, but for this they were doing the opposite. It was actually something that needed updating, and as they continued to update it and improve it, we kind of dropped off of it. But I think the point is though, it's never actually in anyone's mind like dropped off the menu completely. No, I just think I think it's the why. I think if there was a why or a reason, like even today, right? So we jumped onto it for a couple of games because we, as you say, we haven't played it regularly for a couple of weeks to be able to talk about it. And I was happy to jump on it. I absolutely didn't. I wasn't going, I've got to play this. I was like, good, I get to give this a go. And there's a reason why I'm playing this, which is just to refresh my mind. And I was like, do you know what? I sort of quickly got used to the muscle memory and the buttons. And I was like, I do enjoy it. It's fun to play, but is mindlessly just firing off a weapon and mashing stratagems and is that enough? And I think that's the problem. It's like it lacks a higher purpose, like a grind or some form of. I think the lack of progression is its strength and its weakness. Like the ability to sort of just jump in and just earn things and do all that kind of stuff is great, but I think there needs to be some sort of progress. So you go, I'm working towards. They don't do enough though, and I think this is a point like that. Why? Like I think that is the ultimate problem, is the why, but also acknowledging the fact that it's so accessible at the same time. I can understand why they don't want to introduce that, because are they then cutting their nose off to spite their face, or are they eroding some of what makes it good? I don't know. It's just, for me personally, I like to, when I'm playing something, have a reason to continue playing it within reason. I don't want a ludicrous grind, but I don't feel like there's any reason. I mean, the argument of the grind is to get the war bonds to then unlock stuff and do that. Like that could be the grind.
Bow and arrow, explosive crossbrow, your favourite.
I just don't care though. Like this is the problem. Like why do I not care? Like I just don't know. I'm just sort of like, that for me isn't. I think there's so many weapons, and I feel like so many of the ones that are unlocked are. Like I was grinding towards basically the deagle pistol. So I was like, I absolutely want to use that and feel like I can blow some heads off with it. And I got it and I was like, this is so crap.
Yeah.
It's so underwhelming. I'm still using the first shotgun basically that I unlocked on the game. I don't feel like many of the guns are that much better that you'd pay or unlock or spend the time to unlock. I mean, it might be good fun, but ultimately, when it all gets hairy, which it does, and you get dealt with the volume that you've got and the big bastards, like some of these things that are fun to use aren't viable, and they're actually an inconvenience, and they make it harder for you to deal with the game and feel like you're kind of useful to your team. And I think that's part of the problem, is that they make it so difficult later on that you can't use perhaps some of the fun stuff that otherwise you might want to use.
I used to get away with using a turret on top level.
Yeah, but the turret's useful though. Like having someone with a turret. Well, I would. Yeah, that's a great point. I don't know whether there was you kind of straddled this line perfectly of kind of going, well, it's your problem, but at the same time knowingly making it slightly awkward. And it was like I couldn't outright say you're being a bastard. There
was one time I threw a bomb on your head, and I came into your game late. And I threw a bomb on. I didn't know that burying par were there. I thought it was just with random, so I threw a bomb on all your heads and extracted, not realising.
But the fight, this fine, like, and I think that's what makes it kind of fun, though, right? It's the fact that you can do some of that, and there's team killing essentially. But I think, like, even some of the ways that you played it, I think variety in play is actually good, because if everyone plays the same, I think it does make it slightly more difficult if everyone's running a railgun and stuff. Like, there's times when you went, "Don't worry, boys, get behind the turret," and I'm like, "Thank God that's there." Like, so I think some of that did play, but the stratagems, I think you can play ultimately whatever you want. That's okay. But I think if you don't have like a shotgun or an auto rifle, I genuinely think like the charge weapons are like useless, basically, largely, and the pistols are okay as a secondary. But like that deagle, I was hoping, like, if I've got that on target, like that will do some damage to like those smaller bugs, and the reload time on it just kills it. And I'm like, why have you made this so, like, this could be so fun, and you've like all basically like immediately given it this like huge nerf that makes it completely unviable. So some like things like that where I think they could have just made it a bit more fun with some of the weapons and made them fun and useful at the same time, so that you can sort of take it to the next level. But everyone, when we were playing it, pretty much throughout the whole thing, used fire shotguns because it's the only thing that can get through the volume.
I didn't have them, did I? Because I didn't have that premium war bond, so I had to go without that. I was using all manner of shit. But it's always a battle, isn't it? You don't want to create a meta as such, so that everyone has to run the same things. And they actively come out and said this when they did one of their first sort of nerf patches, that the railgun was too powerful, much to the grin of you and Dave, who loved that thing.
100%. Right, it did need a nerf because it was overpowered, but they don't. There's a whole range of discussion that we could get into here about how they balanced the game, and I think that's a constant grapple for them. And it is really hard as well. By the way,
is that every game though that's in this sort of wheelhouse where it's online and there's weapons coming in and out, like new stuff being unlocked, and I don't know, it feels like, even like you've told me before, there's like a meta on Call of Duty Warzone that changes based on the season and whatnot. Essentially, the new guns get prioritised because they want people to be paying it. And I don't think this is different though.
Yeah. Well, I think this is different because you've got scaling difficulty, A, in terms of types of enemy, B, in terms of type of enemy.
So the player's got choice how hard they want to make it. So if they're struggling, bump it down.
Right, so the player's got choice, but
so if that railgun's not good enough, go down to impossible. Back with the babies.
But I think my point is, you're trying to balance. You're not doing PvP. You're trying to balance the enemies and balance the guns. And I think they've struggled with both of those throughout. Right, it's kind of like everyone's gone. There's too many big enemies. They go, all right, we'll reduce how many big enemies you've got. No, they didn't. They increased how many big enemies there were. And then everyone was like, well, because there's so many big enemies, I've got to use a railgun to be able to deal with them. And they went, oh, no, that railgun's now not doing what we need to. And they nerfed the railgun. You go, well, what have I got? I've got nothing now, really, to deal with the big stuff. Like I've got to carry an anti-tank rifle.
Yeah.
And then you get that, and that isn't as useful because you've got 20 railgun bullets and you've got 2 tank. And then they go, all right, well, we'll reduce the amount of big stuff, and then they chuck out all this little shit, and you go, well, there's so much little stuff now that I haven't got the ability to do. And I think, do you see what I mean? It's not only are they trying to fine tune the enemies and the amount of enemies and the types of enemies, and they're not just doing that across bugs; they're doing it across automatons and bots as well, right? So you got that whole complexity. They then introduce weather. Yeah, and I'm like, why is that here? And then they're trying to like tune that mechanic, and you got all. And this is the thing that I think they where they struggled with it, and I think why perhaps some of us lost a bit of interest is because you're like, I can't keep up with this. Like, there's so much stuff going on here, and then they give us a mech to use or whatever that's like great fun, and I shoot a rocket, and if I do it at the wrong angle, it blows me up. And I'm like, so I'm not only am I fighting the fine tuning of the enemies. I'm fighting the fine tuning of the guns. I'm fighting the fucking elements, and I've got to also be careful about using this mech that I really need to use, but I can't shoot in certain directions, or the rocket might blow me up myself because of a bug. Like, do you know what I mean? It's kind of, you're trying to deal with all these variables, and I think if they'd have just spent a bit more time figuring out how they wanted the player, like weapon choices and the enemy interactions to happen first, with the guns in that free war bond. But by the time you got that, you're onto the first premium war bond, and you think, Jesus Christ, and you're working. And then they go, here's the second premium. And you go, right, fuck me, okay, I'm trying to deal with it. Here's a third. You go, good Lord, like this. There was a lot going on at once. And I think all of that kind of coupled with server problems and bugs and like you name it, I think just made it challenging to continue to deal with.
Yeah, we talk about the server issues and technical performance, presentation, proficiency, and obviously the network is a key one in this one because it's an online game, so it needs to be working. This is definitely all. Probably still is. If you're gonna pick a weakness, this is still, I think, the biggest weakness. I don't know if it's as bad as what it was. In fact, it's not as bad as it was because you can play whenever you want. The matchmaking's largely resolved. Although even when we jumped on today, you got booted out as soon as you got into my ship.
I did.
Like, that's still happening like randomly. It's a minor inconvenience, but it's clearly not 100%. But it feels in a much more serviceable state. But there was like a good week where, and it's the second week. It was really funny to watch because the first week, me and Edkins jump in. It's fine. We're playing it. We're enjoying it. We're gassing it up in the Discord, trying to sell it to people, get them involved. That seemed to almost be happening in real time with like the rest of like the gaming community, because as it picked up more and more traction, as that week went on, it got harder and harder to play and became less and less reliable. So by the time the second full weekend come round, everyone had got it. No fuck, I could play it because they were at server capacity and there were issues. People were losing progress. Blah, blah, blah. And really, that wasn't fixed properly for a good week and a half, I would say. And it started to eventually slow down. And that was kind of like at its peak sort of awfulness. They eventually got on top of it. But even in that sense, it's still from a technical point of view, whether you call it networking or just general bugs. And some of the bugs in the game, I think, sort of lend to the charm of it. Like, there's some weird stuff that happens with the physics, which absolutely creates some hilarious moments. But when you extract from a really tough mission and it crashes and you lose all your progress, like that happened once for us on an extreme mission, the final mission to unlock the next difficulty, which would unlock the higher level of samples to get, and it crashed on the extraction after like a tough full 35-minute struggle, and it crashed. I was fuming. I remember audibly squawking down that microphone at my displeasure of that. That sort of stuff's unacceptable. Doesn't seem to happen now, but I'll tell you what, I wouldn't trust it to be 100% still. I don't know if they're ever going to get into a state where it's like, I don't. Maybe you're telling me this is par for the course for like Call of Duties and things like that, but I have a hard time imagining that outside of the first week of like new things happening, maybe there might be some issues. But did this feel noticeably sort of amateur hour when it comes to the networking side of things and its technical side, or was it just about okay in the end?
Well, look, I don't like comparing it to something like Call of Duty or whatever, because the
£300 million budget versus £2 million,
right, like the scale of it and the experience of what they're trying to do and all this kind of stuff is like two completely different things, right? And I think obviously when you're trying to build something, you're thinking, how many people are we likely to attract like day one? Because you're not going to build servers that can cope up to 2 million players if you're expecting 35,000 or whatever, right? Concurrent players. So you have to be reasonable. And I think it's fair to say that this game was more popular than they probably would have, even best case scenario that they probably had mapped out. They were like, there's no way. Like, so.
Do you know what they've done? There's a game called Foam Stars that Square Enix released. Sony, bearing in mind they published Helldivers 2, I think it was 2 days before the release of Helldivers 2, put that brand new game on their PlayStation Plus service. Like, and it's like a bit of a rip-off of Splatoon, so it's an online multiplayer, so it's There's a Venn diagram of overlap of potential players there. So 2 days before this came out, they went, here's one for free or for those of you that are on our subscription service. And I was like, why are they undercutting this so much? Honestly, I think they had no or very low hopes. Because let's be honest, this is something we didn't address at the top of the episode in Cards on the Table. Helldivers 1. I didn't fucking play it.
No.
It was a completely different game. It was a top-down isometric style. I don't know if it's isometric. It was top-down twin-stick style. Still very hard, but it wasn't a 3D kind of third-person game. But I don't think anyone in our group played it.
No, not to my knowledge.
Part of me is like, well, why would you expect this ever to take off and plan for that? But to almost be caught so cold and for it to have a compounding effect for weeks afterwards, because it put back other fixes like the armor stats not working, things that you probably would have got to in the first week were put back because they suffered with these network meltdowns because there were too many people trying to get on.
Yeah, I mean the priority's got to be trying to get people in to play it, like in the doors, like so you can understand why they went. We've got to be able to do this and let people play it, like so. It made perfect sense, but yeah, it was like more successful than they would have ever thought. So it's difficult to really punish it too hard, but I think like the fact that they didn't have things like queuing and you just sort of had to just
oh no, it doesn't.
Like it was literally just like you don't know what was going on. It just kept trying to like restart and get you in there like every 30 seconds. It was just like kick. It's like
you wouldn't know how you'd jump in. It would say you can't get in. It wouldn't give you any indication of how long you could be there. Whereas I don't know, like New World, which I played, that had a queuing system that the first couple of weeks, and you jump in, it would say you're 5,000 in the queue, estimated time 40 minutes. Then you had something to work off. This was just like pot luck, and there was even times where someone would join a queue later and get in because their dice roll or whatever it was doing in the background got through the fucking gaps.
I think there was one night. Yeah, was it Dave? And we both got in, I think, like within the first 5-10 minutes, and Dave was trying to do it for about an hour before, I think, as well, for fucking ages. And he was just so, like, you can understand why in that real time example why you'd be fuming because it's not only the fact that you can't see a queue, it's the fact that there was no visual representation, and because of that, people were just leaving their game on.
Yes.
So they'd get in and not get out. And there was no timeout. So you could just leave it.
They had to introduce that in a patch later on. Someone had to go and work on the code and add that in. So now if you're inactive, I think 15 minutes, it kicks you. So you're not taking up server room. But again, because people were having such trouble getting in, once they're in, they were like, well, I'm not coming out of this. So even if I'm not going to play it, I'm going to sit here in my server spot on my ship and then come back to it tomorrow. It's like, it's fucking absurd.
So when you think back to some of this, like it was bizarre, wasn't it? And it's like, we're thinking at the time, like I'm logged on at like, say I jump on for a bit in my lunch break or something, you'd then be thinking, do I want to log out for the rest of the day because I might not be able to get on this evening? So yeah, it was some wild stuff at the beginning. But you could, like, to be fair to them, I feel like they knew, they engaged, and I think with the resource that they've got and everything like that, because everyone was going, how hard can it be just to buy some new servers? And it's like, well, yeah, I get that. Like at a high level, it probably looks simple, but I'm sure there's some more complexity than we.
My understanding was it was tied into the engine as well. Like it wasn't just buy more servers and do it. They had to recode and do things like that. I mean, again, we'll never know. That's not an excuse, but it took probably longer than it needed to. And still, like I said, largely to this day, even I wouldn't be trusting it with my life if they went right.
Well, the thing is, those Call of Duty servers can't be trusted, or anything.
Right,
Honestly, I even play games on those Rocket League servers where I go, you report. Literally, there is an option to report the server because it's garbage, and you think, God, I don't want to play on that one again.
Yeah.
Like so, and they're owned by Epic now, so it's not a. This is why I try not to kick it too much, because like the comparison of resources and size of like Arrowhead to Epic, Psyonix, Call of Duty for franchise. I mean, Rocket League goes back to like 2015 and Call of Duty before that, right? Yeah. So like we're talking about long established iterative games that still have issues with servers. So I think all things considered in hindsight, I think they did a pretty reasonable job. Although it was frustrating at the time. They did an okay job. Yeah. Give that a good old bash.
He's got a new mic for the occasion.
Yeah, Dave will recognise it. Still still trying to figure it out properly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think all things considered, like technically they did okay. But make no bones about it, it's not slick. There's going to be little problems with it, I suspect, continually. It'll be interesting, I think. I suspect the player numbers have dropped off. I haven't looked at Steam numbers and things like that.
Funny you should say that. I have them here. So
okay, I'll let you.
If you want to have a look at an all-time peak on Steam only, so I think they said it was about 50-50 between Steam and PlayStation. But the all-time peak 2 months ago, 458,709. And in the last 24 hours, the peak has been 133,134. So it's
still pretty reasonable.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's pretty good in terms of concurrent players on Steam. I know it's not a like-for-like, but it gives a good indication. It's not like down in like 4,000 and bits and pieces like that. Like, I remember,
when you look at something like Power World or something like that literally went and then almost straight back down, or something pretty close to it.
Yeah, I mean, if I look now, it's still in the top, whatever this is on Steam DB. It's up there. Its peak's pretty good. Yeah, in the top 10 maybe still. So it's still people. It's still retaining people semi-regularly.
I think there's a group of people that went, look, fuck this. We'll come back to it when it's in a better state. I genuinely think that's what's happened. I mean, Pa messaged or said to me the other day, do you want to jump back on it at some point? And I was like, similar to what you said to me, I'm up for it if other people want to do it. I don't feel like I'm at a point where I feel like I'd want to instigate it. But if there's other people that like want to play it, and like I'd still be up for it, and I'm not planning to uninstall it, right? I still think it could potentially have a not a regular slot, but some sort of periodic, depending on what they introduce, it might sort of go, oh, there's this now, do you want to jump in? And it might I think there's still potential for that. But yeah, I wonder if there's a portion of people that sort of ducked out of it originally and got sick of it and are still sort of going back to it now.
Yeah, I think that's highly likely, considering, as we said, it definitely had issues, which I think a lot of people worked through. But yeah, it's ninth in its 24-hour peak on Steam still.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's still pretty good, isn't it? Up there with, well, it's not up there with Counter-Strike and whatnot, but it's in that top 10. So, although it's not what it was, it's still ticking along nicely, I'd say.
I still think they'd be happy with those numbers. I mean, it's always tricky when you've had such high attention and interest. It always feels like a downer to go back down. But when you look at that peak, that's probably still
let's look at Power World, which is a good barometer, because that definitely was the other thing that come along and was like a big peak. That's down in 24th with 44,000 in its last 24-hour peak. So that's dropped off a little bit. So yeah, I mean, it's doing still pretty well from that perspective. And as I said, largely I think the technical issues are solved. It's not the most well put together game you'll ever see. It's got a little bit of jankiness there. There's still, I'm almost certain if I was to play it for 2 hours, at least once I may get stuck under the planet with my Helldiver launched in the Hell Pod. That was a common thing. Ended up through rocks and whatnot. But generally, I think largely the network issues are resolved. As I said, I don't be betting my life on it, but it sounds like that's just what happens with online games. Even the big boys that have been running for many entries are still not going to be 100%, and it's just par for the course, I guess, for some of these games. The way the game operates itself, like the gameplay and the missions that you get, you essentially choose a planet, you then choose a difficulty level. There's 9 difficulty levels, and you unlock the difficulties by completing missions on the previous level, etc., etc. You jump into what they call an operation, which is between 1 and 3 mission types. And then there's probably about, in total, I'd say, especially with the bots included, at least a dozen different mission types knocking about. I don't know how many there are actually, but they've added a couple and added a few as time's gone on. And yeah, you choose an operation, it has 3 missions, you dive in, 1 to 4 players, and then once you hit the ground, you've obviously got the usual sort of third person gameplay and shooting, which we'll chat about. But once you're on the planet, you've got your main objective, which will be different depending on what you've chosen, and then there'll be sub objectives throughout that. You might come across a little facility that wants you to bomb or take down or kill a load of bug holes that are regenerating bugs and whatnot. And then, like you mentioned earlier, there's sort of like a third-rate goal where throughout the game you'll pick up these samples, and there's 3 different categories of those, like a common sample, rare, and I think a super sample. And they are used to upgrade your ship module, which allows you to add more bombs, your stratagems, and the stratagems are basically your powers and your support weapons and things that you can call in. But as an overall game package, obviously there's a lot to talk about that we could dive into. How did you find this loop, the gameplay, the stratagems being so tactile, the missions that you'd go on, the planets, the enemy, all that sort of stuff? When you get boots on the ground and you're running around expecting to clean house, how did it function?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? Because I think the whole thing leads up to the experience, right? So the fact that you've got your own ship with your own little ship name, right?
Oh yeah, you get to name it, don't you? Yes.
You get to name it. And you can call it anything. It can't call it anything. It's not free format, but there's a whole range of different options that you can select to come up with the overall title, right? So you could call it like the Defender of Democracy or and things like that, right? So, and you could see them when you join up together, like you see each other's stupid ship names and things like that. And then you join someone's ship and you can potter around their ship and stupid emotes and do all that kind of stuff. And then someone's at the little desk selecting the mission, and then it sort of gets you all to your hell pods, and you then have to be launched, and there's some epic music on you launch the planet where it's like,
I'd argue if that music weren't there, it would have half the players. Honestly, I think it's a massive part of it.
Yeah, I love that little bit, like that little, like where you're all in the hell pods and you see yourself sort of going down to the planet with the epic music. Yeah, and then you just kind of get out, and you figure out where you are. Like the whole thing from the moment you get into the game through to finishing the mission and extracting is kind of like, I'd say, all part of the experience.
Yeah.
And like when you're actually on planets, you've done that whole thing and you get there and you say you've got your loadout and your gear basically set up and stuff. I mean, I think that the actual controls are pretty good. I don't think they perfectly adapt to a mouse and keys. I do think that it was designed for a controller. I don't understand how someone could have designed this with a PC mouse and keys in mind. Like, so
it's not very precise, is it? And I think that's by design. Like when you start firing, there's like almost like a reticle inside a reticle where the bullets are actually going to go, and you can't really control that. Whereas as you would attest to, on a mouse and keyboard, if you're playing Call of Duty or Valorant or something, it demands that you have extreme accuracy.
Yeah.
I can see whereas someone on a mouse will get slightly annoyed because
it's not even with the mouse, it's with the sheer amount of buttons that you need, or that, like, I mean, forgetting the stratagems, like you've got options on your gun, so even down to like selecting safe and unsafe mode on a railgun and putting your torch on, and like all these various different things. Just I had to hold R and then up and down on the mouse wheel to select whether I wanted it unsafe or safe, and just feel it works, but it doesn't feel, it's suboptimal, I would say. And the argument is, look, you could have switched over to a controller, absolutely, but it's kind of like I'd made a commitment to mouse and keys, and by the time you learn that, you're kind of far enough down the road where you think, okay, I can deal with this. But like I had to do instant remaps on the buttons anyway, just to get to the point it was at.
Yeah.
And I should have, again, this is where it becomes tricky to explain, right? Because I'll moan about the stratagem piece, right? So I'm holding W to go forward or get away. I'm trying to press space to like, or whatever it is, or tab, shift, whatever it is to jump out the way of getting hit, right? So I've got two fingers already that I have to hold W and shift to do that. And then I've somehow got to hold Q down. And then also use the mouse to control where I'm looking, whilst also inputting up, down, left, and right to do to get a stratagem in or to get someone back. Like that isn't that just isn't ideal, like at all, right? And there were people obviously that found a way around it by using certain button like key binds and things to do certain macros and stuff to get around it, which isn't in the spirit. I mean, the idea of the stratagem is that it is a pain in the ass. Yeah, it's the pressure to get it off. Like, and it's a unique aspect.
I love that. I love that whole stratagem piece of the inputs. And it's not just the stratagems, because that's to call in, like I say, it could call in a bomb, it could call in a new weapon, a support weapon, a turret. But also, often during the missions, you have to go to a terminal and input a little up, down, left, right code, and then do some other bits on the other sort of tactile inputs whilst there's things going on around you trying to kill you. And the big one for me is when you're trying to extract out of a really hairy situation, you've got to input a command there as well, and that's sometimes the pressure one. You've got people going, make sure that ship's there, and you're like, hands are fucking slipping, you blow it and you've got to restart it. Like, I know it's a pain, but that's, to me, was like all the experience. I loved that. Yeah,
getting better and doing getting it off right was satisfying. Like, you were like, I've remembered that, rather than going, or like not calling in. You think, oh fuck, and you go, get me back, and you go, I'm trying. Like, I'm trying to put it in correctly. Yeah, it added a nice dimension, but it wasn't easy to deal with on the keyboard, and obviously it wasn't ever meant to be easy. Like, it's meant to be a difficult thing to do, but I did find that a little bit more challenging. But overall, like, the gunplay's good. I liked
nice
it.
And crunchy.
Like, it's crunchy and it's satisfactory, and
dropping a 500 kg bomb on 1500, well, 1500, dozen or so bugs. Just watching that, like, it's really. This sounds stupid. But sometimes when certain things would happen, all this, and it's all dynamic, it's online, there's certain spawn points and whatnot, but no mission really played out the same, I don't think. Sometimes you'd land and be fine, sometimes you'd land and you'd be under the cosh. But there was like a really like weird thread of like cinematic moments that just happened in the game whilst we were playing organically, But whether it's you saving me by dropping a bomb just in front of me, and I dive out the way at the last second, and then all the bugs that are in front of me got killed, or dropping a fucking turret down and watching it mulch down all the bugs in your way, or just scrambling to get on the ship knowing you've got 15 samples, you're the last one alive, and just managing to weave your way through all the toot and just getting on with 1 second to like. There's dozens and dozens of examples of these that I could pull out. There was you play like 1-2 hour session and you'd have about 15 clips that you could in theory post that looked really cool. And it's obviously not scripted. It's based on our inputs and certain parameters around the world, and they always felt organic and unique. And I was like, that's I don't know how you can design for that. It's just that's the game's sandbox essentially just coming to life as people are interacting with it. I don't think they. Well, obviously they had an idea and thought this could be really cool, but seeing it come together like that's what kept me hooked. Was just every match was, just one more, just see what happens next time. It's a good point that there wasn't a huge amount of variety, specifically in mission types, and it's specifically us. Like 99% of the time, we're doing bugs, right, and we're doing the same sort of missions. But although they're the same sort of missions, to your point, they don't play out in the same way. No. Like there's not, you can't go, oh, I know what enemies are coming out here, or where that bug hole's coming from, or like you could just do something like fuck your reload up, and then you get stabbed and that's it, you're down, and then all of a sudden someone's scrambling to try and get you back, and like then you land on his head and he died. Like every game was different in that respect. And one of the things I always quite liked is we kind of knew what we were all running and how we all played and stuff. And each of us have got different play styles. And Dave's a maverick. You let him get on with what he's doing. Hall will just like there was one game that we played a little while ago where Dave and Hall were like running off doing the stuff. And me and you were just, I don't know what we were doing. We were just trying to do something together. But it was just like, it's just kind of like this unwritten, everyone can do what they want. There's like no stress really about why are you going off there doing that, like, or why are you triggering that. This kind of like all just everything does happen organically. There's no one's getting a bollocking really for doing anything. Like I remember when I started putting mines down and I got a bit of a bollocking for that, and there become this like unwritten rule that we don't run
like mines and stuff because so there's loads of things that did just happen that kind of were just born out of the way that we all played the game. And you're right, there's a lot of fun things and cool things. And I mean, every time you drop one of them half a ton bombs, like it's still, I never get bored of that. Like just seeing it just like go off. It's super satisfying. So yeah, it's one of the things that the game does really well, I think, is keeping that fresh and keeping that like interesting, because it's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, I think sometimes some games just come to life, and that's when people start interacting with it, with all different play styles and ideas. That's the game's set up in a way that it will allow for that, and people can have a great time, and that's definitely what played out during the majority of them. I mean, I looked at the stats. Like, the amount of times we failed a mission was actually quite rare, even on like the highest difficulties. And there was like, even in the most dire circumstances, like we'd drop into a planet and lose like a third or half of our reinforcement lives, and we'd be like, well, there's no way we can do this because we've got 10 lives between us now, and we've absolutely fucked this. But 9 times out of 10, we would find a way and get through it, and it might even come down.
I don't even know if that's the game.
No,
I just think you sort of go, right, okay, because you can be super cavalier and stupid, right, and like careless, and like I'd like be running around with my fire shotgun, like you're there, but if I don't really care, like, and you just go, your lives get a bit lower, and you think, no, I won't, like just let off, like, so you do sort of slightly adjust the gameplay, but you're right, like you do. It can get a bit weird, especially if you land shit. Like it feels like each of you dying, and then someone drops again, and they drop one of those stratagems.
You just get your craps on with bug breaches and everything. Like, it's not going to end, is it? And it does eventually. You
spend 15 minutes just going, right, what are we doing?
Yeah.
But then you do find a way to stabilize, as you say, and sort of get through to the end of the mission. And you're right, it's not. Even the hard missions, they're hard, but you don't ever really find yourself in a position where you're out of the count, and that's it, and it's over, and you go, Jesus, how are we going to do that? Like, there's normally a way of doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I even had fun just jumping into random people's games, like as a support. But I remember one of them I jumped into, the poor bloke was really struggling on one of those egg missions. Yeah. And I was the first one to jump in. I think he had 4 lives left. And I was like, Jesus, he's really burnt through those, because I think some people had left as well. Yeah. And I came in and I didn't really know what I was doing. I was on like second from last difficulty, and I just went and done the eggs, just sprinted through, started doing the eggs. As the game went on, 2 more people came in. It made it a bit easier. And then before we knew it, it was like one last little egg hatch to get rid of. We had about 3 lives between us at that point. Got that all extracted, and then that guy was so happy in the chat afterwards because it unlocked Helldiver mode afterwards. It was like this little like story where he's like, "Oh, thanks for coming in. I really was in trouble there." It was like this little meta story that's played out because we just dived in randomly and saved it around for him. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I did much. I was just throwing Gatling guns out and watching the carnage unfold. But certainly he was grateful for that. And the good thing about that was it unlocked it for all of us, the next difficulty, because it was the last of the operation. It was like, oh no, we've all got it as well. And then, so
all round pats on the back, democracy saved.
Exactly, managed democracy. That's how it works. So there is something to it that I don't think most people would get a kick out of playing it with randomers, but I think you can, because I did play a good third of it like that and found most of the time enjoyable. There's a lot of wholesome people. Yeah, like, one of the things that, because there's no team killing's on all the time, so
that's what I was trying to get to. Like friendly fire is a thing continuously, so you could easily get a load of people that go on there just to ruin your life.
Griefing and doing whatever.
Yeah, I didn't experience outside of our group. Much, if any, of that. And I think the one time that I did do it is because I did it to someone else. Yeah. There's probably a clip lurking somewhere of me doing that. But I think he deserved it. And I can't remember why off the top of my head. But I would
probably
say
throwing mines out everywhere.
There was some reason behind it. I think it's because he shot me and did something. But anyway, there's a whole
throwing a resupply out somewhere where it's only him in that.
He was not playing it in the way that I thought he should, I think, is generally. And Dave would hopefully concur with that assessment.
He sanctioned the team killing, did he?
Yeah, and normally Dave's a pretty good moral compass for whether you've done the right or the wrong thing.
Depends how much wine he's had.
Well, yeah, that's true. But generally the community is wholesome, and like there was a lot of people that would come in on team and voice chat and start talking, and I experienced a lot of people that generally just wanted to come in and help or be helpful. Like, I didn't experience a lot of people. There's a lot of like people that just wanted to come in by themselves and they just maverick run off around the map, and I'd be like, fine. Like,
well, they were helpful distraction, weren't they?
Go off and do your thing. Yeah, if you want to do it that way, like I'm fine with it. But yeah, I think one of the good things that I can say about it is it'd be easy for people to come in and just behave like children and, as you say, grief and stuff. But there was always this common sense of like, we want to get it done, get our war bonds and get all the things ticked off and get out. And I think that the way the whole game's structured enables that outcome as well, which I think shouldn't go unnoticed.
Yeah, the friendly fire, I mean, from the outside, people looking at him would be thinking that's just a recipe for disaster, but it really does add a lot to the game. Most people, as you said, don't tend to grief, and you just have to be a little bit more mindful and careful, like, and understand that chucking that bomb out there, if someone is in amongst it, you're going to kill them, and that maybe by design. Maybe you think it's worth just taking the loss at that point because you get a number of reinforcements per go. But I think that added a nice element to it, whereas a lot of games don't have the guts to do that because they don't trust that people will be able to manage it. I think generally it came out. If it had no friendly fire, I think you'd lose a huge amount of what makes the game.
I think that plays into the lore of the Helldivers in that it's like, because they're frozen, right? And we can't quite make out whether they're like clones or like avatars or...
I don't think they're clones. These are all people that have enlisted via the propaganda to fight the good fight. Because essentially you're not actually a Helldiver, you're like the ship commander who you set up, you know, the loadout for the Helldivers, and you get to control them when they're on the planet. But they're so expendable. Like there's just, you just burn through these poor troops, and I think that's kind of the part of the setup. These people have been enlisted, frozen almost immediately once they decide they want to do it, and then they're wheeled out when there's a conflict, which happens to be the timeline we're in now. And I do like the way it does tie in nicely that you're not like, I don't know what example to use, but it never made sense to me in like Call of Duty how you respawned.
Yeah.
Like you just I'm just appearing out of nowhere. Whereas in Helldivers, no, you're coming
chuck another
down.
One down.
Yeah, chuck another one, and then you come in from the fucking orbit, come crashing down on the like. It's all. I was like, yes, it's all contextualized.
They did it well, to be fair. And as you say, it's not taken. It's kind of again done tongue in cheek, and as you say, it fits in with that lore. It's like you can literally come down, get. And immediately got a bug on you, you die. Yeah. It's like, that's it.
That your person died,
gone.
Yeah,
like,
gone
and then it's just like reinforcements, and you get another one down, and then they come down, and you get a 500 kg bomb on your head, and you go, right.
Yeah. I mean,
and that's,
to me, it's like a clear commentary on like war and how people are just seen as expendable resources through them. Like there's a bit of commentary going on there. It's like, it doesn't matter. You're just a number, but you know, you got the mission done in the end. It might have cost 20 lives, but what do we care? Like we've crushed the bugs again. But
sorry, we did digress there. But in terms of like overall like gameplay, it's fun. I think the problem, the one thing that I would like is better, and I've talked to it, is you're kind of forced to deal with volume a lot. And I think there's definitely different weapons that work better for bots than bugs, and I'm okay with that. But I think I'd have preferred a more enabled how do I put it, like it encouraged you to do some more variety within the gameplay. Like that was okay.
Would just not stepping it down a few levels do that though, so that you're not as...
I don't like this. I don't feel like I should have to do it on an easier setting to just use worse guns. Because I referenced it earlier, I was using a slug shotgun when we were playing, so we were doing it on a slightly lower difficulty, and it's like, it's actually fun to be able to use something slightly different. Whereas and I've tried it and tried using some other guns, but basically I actually got anything that can mow a lot of stuff down, and you've got to have something to deal with the big tut as well. Like both of those basically take up 2 of your 3 slots, and you've got to figure out what you're doing. And I think just some way to have a little bit more variety than just feeling like the shotgun's the only like real viable thing to be useful as a weapon. I mean, you could use a assault rifle, but like the marksman rifles were literally a waste of time for bugs. Like you just can't use them.
I used the little Uzi to get rid of the small tut, and then the medium armor penetrating. I mean, I'll change quite often. I'd unlock something and use it. I wasn't overly precious about my loadout. I found
I did use things once. Then I think I remember unlocking like a charge, or an automatic charge rifle, and it was just like so awful that I was like, I can't kill anything like meaningful. It's not good with small stuff. It's not good with medium stuff, and it's not good with large. So I was like, I can't really use it. But I think that's just the one thing that I felt, is that I only felt like powerful or that I was able to do stuff with like the sprayer shotguns. Really. It was basically like just spray everything at the volume and then have a railgun or an anti-tank rifle for the big shit. Which is fine. Like, if that's the way that bugs need to be played, then that's the way bugs need to be played.
That's why the Gatling gun was installed. That's that Gatling turret. So I wouldn't advertise. I'll just chuck that down to deal with most of the turret. Obviously, it's on a cooldown, but yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely some duds in there. There's a lot of redundant stratagems and redundant weapons, and I guess that's the same with any game. Like, I'm sure someone could get really good at a really what we would consider a poor loadout if you know how to play it and know the strengths.
I mean, better people, better people would be better with certain guns, right? And I think what the point that I'm making is, and I don't really know how to best articulate it, is I didn't feel like there was much skill-based reward. So normally with some of the weapons, the better you are with them, the more effective they are and the more effective you are. So there's kind of like an incentive to increase your skill, if you like, at the game, to be more effective with the weapon. I don't feel like the weapons encourage you to put the time in to be better with them. There's not a...
I never learned to get good at the railgun.
But even the railgun, you just blast a key point. And I think... But I mean... I'm trying to think of an example. So, like in Call of Duty,
get the spear
like
out,
there's
auto lock, bang.
Well, that works. But in Call of Duty, like there's guns that, if you can manage the recoil better, or if you're more skilled with the recoil handling, like you'll be better with it, and you get a reward for being better because the gun's more powerful. Whereas guns that have a bit less power have less recoil, right?
Yeah.
So there's kind of like a risk and reward of using a weapon. Like, if you want to get good with a weapon, it will give you the rewards back. And I think that's the one thing that I found with the weapons in the game, is that I don't particularly feel like, when you think about progression, like you start off with the stand, like think back to when we loaded it up. You get a pistol, you get an AR, and you get a shotgun, largely. Right? I think that's basically what you get. And then as you unlock more weapons, I don't feel like those weapons that you unlock through the war bonds are like encouraging you to work at them, to get better at them, because they're good. I think most of them are actually the complete opposite. I think they're turt, like, and they're not particularly good at all. And I think that's the one.
Wow.
What I wanted to have was like some sort of like encouragement to be better with the weapon, to get the reward from it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I mean, I understand that completely.
And from day one to day dot, when we were playing today, I've been using a sprayer shotgun. So I'm like, this is the best way of dealing with it. I don't feel like there's anything to encourage me beyond me wanting variety or a change to get better with another weapon, or to practice or whatever.
That brings us on to something that we should touch on, and it's monetization, because there is a monetization strategy in this game. And I think part of what you're saying there is perhaps one of the reasons why they didn't go so hard into making unlockable weapons behind a paywall advantageous, or as advantageous as you might think, because there's a line they're straddling here. It's 35 UK pounds, probably cheaper now. You know, it's not a free to play game. On top of that, you can buy a premium war bond, which is basically their battle pass, that has a number of exclusive items in there: weapons, armor, cosmetics, emotes, all the usual tut you'd see. And I think somewhere in a boardroom, somewhere in a design meeting, they're like, look, we want to put stuff in there that people might want to experiment with, but we don't want to create a new meta that's hidden behind one of these paid war bonds. Whereas, you know, I've seen other games that absolutely do that. Characters in Overwatch being locked behind them, for example, that become, you know, a big strength. So I think they're just trying to avoid that controversy. Now, I don't know whether they pulled it off. I mean, you're in a better place to me to discuss their monetization strategy and how the microtransactions work. I found them pretty not egregious at all. You can earn the currency in game. I've earned enough to go down one of the premium war bond routes. You could grind for that. I don't know if it's reasonable. I think it would take a lot of time, but you certainly could do that. But I never felt like I'd lost out by not having one of the premium ones, which is ironic because I think one of the weapons you actually use all the time is that shotgun sprayer that sets things on fire, which I haven't got. But I don't know. I feel like there's a danger of a slippery slope if you start creating items behind those paid tutters. And
I'll give you my perspective, right?
Yeah.
If you don't want to introduce pay to win, then have cosmetic only.
Yeah.
Right? If you want to introduce new weapons and things like that, then I think they've got, and I'm paying for it, I feel like it should be better. Otherwise, what am I? I'm not going to use it.
There's a boxing emote that I've got.
I'm fine with that. That's what I mean. It's cosmetic. It doesn't have any. But you're giving me weapons and armor. I think this is where the I'm ingrained almost over the years to, it's like if I've paid for a battle pass, if I've paid for something, I get a leg up.
It gets a leg up. This one, auto aim switched on.
There's something about that makes it better than standard tut. Like, and I think Call of Duty does that through its battle pass. It introduced weapons and things through that. And arguably, like, does it matter as much in a PvE as well? Would be my point.
Yeah, there is that.
You're not. It's not like you're competing against someone else who's going to not have a leg up. It's against bots. Like you're playing against a computer, which is why I find it even more bizarre. It's kind of like be devastating. Like, and it's not like, as you say, I don't have to put money into it. I can earn these through gameplay. Like, so I don't understand the reason why they can't make those things better. Like, surely the idea should be, here's standard issue, right? If you think down the law, Helldiver, if you want to use some of your recce points or whatever it is to buy something that might give you a leg up in the war battle, like, do you know what I mean? I just think it's a bit of a strange thing to do. It's like, then that gives you an incentive either to put money into it, to play something that's fun, or to do something like, do you know what I mean? And it fits into the law. And I just think I think I bought one of the battle passes or one of the war bonds. And I just felt a bit, it wasn't even that it wasn't underpowered. It just felt like not in fun. I think what I wanted was fun, not like this like overpowered.
They aren't all that. I'd absolutely. Like I said, I got I think it's still the latest one that I've got, and like the stuff I've got in it is good fun. Like I said, the explosive crossbow, but it's largely ineffective against larger enemies. So I wouldn't necessarily seriously run with that. Although I might, just to annoy people around me. They're like, "Why haven't you got this fucking run?" But yeah, it's not. I agree. Is the other side of my brain's like, that's good. I don't want to be feeling like I'm missing out by not paying out. I don't want to have to grind for these super credits that you can find in the random sort of hatches and whatnot. But they've kind of done it because they want to be able to get some extra value out of it, but they don't want to tread on anyone's toes. And yeah, it's a tough spot to be in, really.
They're sitting on the fence, and I think that's the problem with it. You either do it and just give people cool cosmetics, which is fine, right? I've got no issue with that. Or if you want to give them new guns and weapons, like in that sort of game, you've either got to make them better, more viable, or fun, or any of those. And I think they're none of those. So I'm sort of a bit like, and that makes me think, like, why? I think that's why I was disappointed in them, because they're putting them out there. And they're not even, I mean, they're viable, but barely. And some of them aren't even viable. I mean, I've talked to that Desert Eagle pistol. You can't really run it because it takes so long to reload. It's just pointless. And there's things like that where I think you could have made that fun. Like, that could have been a really cool thing. An armor that, like, you can activate an electronic pulse thing to get there. Like, and think just little things like that would made it really cool. Like you sort of see all these bugs, you get a load of bugs around you, all of a sudden an EMP or a pulse goes out and it goes fries it. Like there's so much potential there, and I think they've just skirted around it a bit too heavily. Would be my view.
Yeah. It's tricky, isn't it? They do have when you load the game, there is a free war bond, which takes fucking forever to get through. There's thousands of medals.
10 pages of it.
Yeah, so there's plenty there as a first time use that you jump on and get to. And after that, the premium war bonds are much shorter. They're only 3 pages compared to the 10. So I think they should introduce occasionally another free one, like every quarter, 6 months. I don't know what the cadence should be, just so that newer people diving in might find some newer stuff in there, or old people coming back who maybe are a bit unsure about buying the super credits or grinding for them, want to have something to work towards. But yeah, I understand all the points that have been raised from their side, from your side, in that you kind of want to have a bit more of a bombastic loadout if you've paid for it. There's no winning this situation, unfortunately. If they'd gone the more aggressive route, you would have seen, and even what they've got here, I still saw, it's pay to win, it's this, it's that, it's egregious, it's horrible microtransactions. I don't think I agree with that, but I'm not in the best place to answer that. I don't
think it's egregious. I definitely don't think it's pay to win, at least in my perspective.
Pay to win against what? The bots, as you said, huh?
Yeah, I did see some people using some of the later guns that looked really effective against bots.
Yes.
But, and I was like, okay, fine. And I'm okay with that. Like, I think one of my earlier criticisms was like the why.
Yeah.
And it's like, some people do like a grind. Like, look at Destiny. Like, people like to be working towards, within reason, something and feeling like they're making progress towards it. And I think I was okay, as you say, you don't have to buy it. It's absolutely not pay to win. It's completely viable without it.
Yeah.
But if you want some cool stuff, here it is. And I think the problem is they've tried to not make it intrusive, and they've tried to sort of skirt that point. But then people that do, and I'm not saying that I feel aggrieved by it, but I'm saying that I could understand people that have bought and put money into this, why they'd be like, this is shit. Like, why have I put all this money into these war bonds and I don't feel like I'm really getting much viable armor or viable weapons out of it? So
the problem is it shows you what you can get, but you don't know how effective they are until you get hands on it. So you might think, that crossbow looks really good, pay for it, and then be like, it's actually really not that good.
Yeah. Well, in my head, I think it's on like one with all the arc damage. There's like an arc shotgun.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that would be a shotgun that arcs like electricity on, and it just didn't really. It was like a slug that explodes on the floor, and I was like, well, that's just crap. Like, that's not as satisfying as I imagined. I mean, look, you can put some of the blame on that on me, and I don't particularly mind putting money down for battle passes for new items and content and stuff. I'm kind of cool with it, but I think I just felt a little bit underwhelmed by it overall as well. Like, I think you could still just basically, and this is probably by design, like use the default guns and armor and be perfectly serviceable, which is, again, I say it's an advantage, but it's also a slight, I wouldn't say disadvantage, but a slight frustration when you've put hours and hours and hours into it that you don't feel like you've made any progress really beyond people that have just started.
They're all fair points, absolutely. Start to close it down. One thing I want to bring up is that is actually an astounding level of attention to detail handed out in parts of this game. And one of them is that each of the planets has an active orbital system and cycle, and it dictates the daytime and nighttime. So when you go to a planet, you sort of, light speed over to it. You'll choose a mission from the map, and you'll go to a certain part of the planet. It might be on the north, south, east, west. As you travel to that part of the planet, it will line up the lighting and time of day, and that will change in real time as you go through the missions. And I was like, why is that even in there? But it's fucking quality.
A little nod to people like you, I think.
Yeah, and even like you can see your stratagems coming out of orbit when you launch one of the missiles. That is one of the missions that you can do. It fucking unfolds and goes up in the air, and even goes and fucking explodes dozens and hundreds of miles away, and you can see it on the horizon exploding. There's like all this stuff in there. I think most games wouldn't bother because it doesn't really add anything truly. But I like having those little bits of detail just added in, a bit of care.
You can tell they liked making this game.
Yeah,
like it almost felt like a bit of a vision from someone or some people there, where they were like they wanted certain things in it, and you feel like they've followed that through. Like they had this. Maybe they had a Starship Troopers vision, but couldn't pay for the Starship Troopers.
Someone's already got it. They've used it on that early access game. Crap that out in front of people.
They went, we're going to put our own little spin on it and how we vision it. And you kind of feel like, that's how I feel. It's kind of like someone's pet project, if you like, of a game that they wanted that they've made out. Because you say the whole, and it goes back to what I said earlier, this whole sort of like event from the moment you load up the game to the moment that you finish a mission and get back to the ship and repeat that cycle is the event. And I think that's what's pretty cool about it.
We reference Starship Troopers a lot, completely ignoring the bots, which is clearly Terminator. Like that's clearly like it's they've got the little red eyes, like
it's T800s. Like,
and that's we didn't. That's my one kind of regret is we didn't spend as much time. We never mastered the bots, did we? Like bugs, I felt like we were pretty handy at. We could do the top level. The bots we never did because I think they're just more challenging. That's one thing I'd like to try and do at some point in the future is master those bastards, because it requires a completely different play style. You kind of almost need the shield on because there's bullets coming your way quite a lot and some of the heavier machinery that comes. And I think they are more challenging for sure, but I like there's two very diverse. There's two very diverse enemy types that require a completely different play style and loadout. I don't think we'd get away. That shotgun of yours would be useless. It's no good. That's something worth keeping in mind, is that we're probably a bit fatigued on the bugs. We know all the ins and outs, what works, what doesn't work, but we never spent the time to really do the bots properly, which would probably have required new strategies, new stratagems, new loadouts, armor, etc. They just
weren't as fun. I think because they're a bit slower. Well, they're a bit slower, and I think when I play this, I'm like, again, I am in that. I play it because of that Starship Troopers-esque element. I just don't think they're as fun with the bots. I don't know why either. I think because they're slower, it's just a bit more of it is a different battle, but I think I find it less fun. But I do agree there is a bit of a gap there that perhaps needs looking at in future.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do the formalities then. We've got the gaming gallery. We can choose to take it in there, and in which case it will be awarded with either platinum, gold, silver, or bronze, or we can shun it and leave it outside looking. I don't know where do they get stored outside? Because we've got the botchling bin, which is when the game ain't been finished or completed. It goes in the bin because you didn't finish. You put that in the bin, but there needs to be some sort of. What are they up to? Where are they going? It can't be a bin. Storage locker?
No. I mean...
Storage wars? What are they called?
Oh, what a... bloody hell.
Called? They have a name, or they're just called storage? They're not called storage lockers, are they?
Oh.
Big yellow self-storage is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, they're these... I mean, over here, they're like garages, but in America, they have like... What you'd use on a shipping container. I don't know what you'd call it.
Have a shipping container somewhere outside in the car park. Skip? That's still too offensive. A skip. That's more like a bin, isn't it?
It's a bin for bigger stuff.
Self-storage.
Yeah, all right.
Dimp storage.
Yeah.
Shed. Whatever. We'll tighten up on that. But are we going to put this in the storage locker, or is it going to go into, or the self-storage, or is it going to go into the gallery, the coveted gaming gallery?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it goes in the gallery. Yes. I don't see how it can't, to be honest.
No, for me, it's a no-brainer to chuck it in there. Well, the all-important question then, Helldivers 2, what are you going to award it with? A platinum, gold, silver, or a bronze?
It's an interesting one, because I think historically our position with these games has been technical issues. It automatically gets docked a point. But I find it hard to levy. I think that they've shot above where you'd expect, broadly speaking, and in so many fronts that it's then difficult to penalise the fact that they didn't hit like what a AAA game might.
It weren't priced at a AAA game, is it?
And it weren't priced at a AAA game, and I think everything into account with it. I thoroughly enjoyed and will, I'm sure, continue periodically to enjoy playing it. And I have concerns about its longevity, and it's not perfect by any means, but it's still super fun, and I still really enjoyed it. It's the great unifier.
Unless you're an Xbox.
Unless you're an Xbox, which is unfortunate, but I think pretty much most of the people that would have played this are either on PC or PlayStation from our group anyway, it's all good. For me, it goes in silver.
Nice. A nice silver for Sir Logan and Helldivers. They can't be disappointed with that. So for me, yes, disastrous technical moments for sure, but 100 hours plugged in. Probably the most fun I've had in a multiplayer game for literal years, probably going back to those raids, those early raids on Destiny. Like, not perfect for sure, but very, very good. So just enjoyable, just at a base level. So therefore, gold.
Yeah.
I think it's really... I mean, I'm not really the multiplayer person, and we might get one of these every few years, and it sucked me in. And it seemed like even the veterans enjoyed it. You guys were enjoying the time. Perhaps didn't have the long tail that people expect, but I've got a question about that coming afterwards. But yeah, a nice gold. It was just really was... I mean, I was thinking like game of the year. Like it'll be there for me, because I can't see how a game that's completely outside of what I'd normally play could suck me in that much. And yes, there were stressful moments. There was when it was under the cosh, all that good stuff. But the jubilation of just getting through those missions and getting on that fucking pelican to get out of there with all the samples. There's nothing really that beats that camaraderie as well. Like, it's all pats on the back afterwards once all the stress has been done. And it's like, we got through it. Well done, boys.
It's a really, really fun game to play. I think I like playing games with friends, right? But everything's usually in some way pitted against you or someone else. Like there's very little out there that pits you as a team up against an enemy in the way that this does, and creates the sort of moments that this does with, even like you think back to Destiny, like that breaks friendships, like that stress in those raids, like that really, I mean, all the clips are there in the back catalogue, but it gets you at one another's necks, and very rarely, if at all, were any of us like actually like annoyed with each other. Like there might be one of those moments where you sort of just get back and get yourself sorted, and then a bomb gets on your head, and you hear like the sighs, you go, oh. You go, fucking hell. But that's about as bad as it gets. Like, and I think that's a testament to it, that it straddles a lot of lines very well. And the biggest criticism is that I want it to give me a better reason to play it. Like, which you can't say for many games, right? Most of the time you want a way out, but this you want a way in. And for a relatively small studio on a smaller budget to deliver this, and the way that they engage with the community, listen to the community, and iteratively update it is good. Not perfect, but thoroughly enjoyable.
Yeah, clapping all round, I'd say. Clap them in. Here's the big question. I've got 100 odd hours into it. I think you, on your Steam profile, it's showing as 70 odd, so you could probably shave 10, 15 off each of our respective hours from queuing and rolling the dice to try and get in and fanning around on the ship and whatnot. But still a lot of time we've both put into that, and so's everyone across sort of the Dimp clans that got involved. We talk about longevity, and these games have got to keep going on and on and on. Is it not just okay that sometimes you play a game for 70 hours and you're like, I'm done.
Yeah,
I don't need to
absolutely.
I don't need to be going on forever. Or is it just the fact that it's set up that way, that it's always going to be, they're always going to be moving forward step by step, that you kind of think, well, if you want people to be engaged, seeing them drop their peak from nearly 500,000 down to 120 is a disaster. But I still think 35 UK pounds.
I think it's more of a personal perspective that I want to play it, but I need an additional higher purpose or reason or something to make me want to go back, like make me go into our Dimp group and go, is anyone playing this evening?
Well, after people have muted it, so can he get people?
Well, there is that. But yeah, you know, I think it's not from a point. This is what I mean. It's a really interesting criticism because I want it to give me a reason, because I want to play it. It's not that I'm looking for a way out. Like sometimes on Destiny, you think I just want to get this fucking raid done so I can put it down. Like it's almost the opposite, where I'm like, give me the purpose so that I can play your fun game and have fun with my mates. Like I think that's the best thing. It's like it's the best, and you said it's the best thing you've played since those raids, and I think it's some of the most fun I've had with my mates on a game for a long time, like in that sort of format. So kudos to it.
So there we go. Helldivers 2 lands itself a lovely silver and a gold in the Dimp digital gaming gallery. As I said, we'll be on bank holiday break next week, but nothing's stored up, so who knows when we'll actually be back. But a nice meaty hour and 40 odd minutes they got here. So, you know, they've been shorter recently, but these
take the fucking bones out of that.
Well, got the energy to do it now. I haven't wasted an hour talking about what Phil's said in the latest fucking interview that he's done. So it allows us to put a bit more focus on the games.
Indulge.
Exactly. Overindulge, many are saying. But we'll be back when we're back. Stay subscribed and you'll be notified when a new episode drops. But as always, nothing more for us to say other than thanks for your time and ta-da.
This was a Dimp Digital production.
Hello there, Adkins from Dimp Digital. This is my review for Hi-Fi Rush, played on the Xbox Series X via the very good Game Pass. Didn't know too much about this one going in. Obviously, cards on the table. I've played a few Tango Games works, notably Evil Within. So yeah, was sort of not sure what to expect with this, and was very pleasantly surprised whilst playing this. This is like a third-person action rhythm game, hack and slash rhythm game that is. So sort of combat's on the line of sort of like a Devil May Cry, but you have to do it to the beat of music, and that sort of rock music basically. Yeah, I was a big fan of this game, to be fair. The aesthetic of it is quite different. Well, it's not different. I mean, it has been done in games before, but it's not one that you see very many. So it's sort of cartoon, cel-shaded look. Yeah, it's a very pretty looking game. Story was pretty serviceable. You know, it introduces a lot of characters. There's some likable characters, some meh characters. And the story, you know, sort of a box standard sort of story. There's nothing to write home about. It's serviceable, but you know, I ain't going to be winning any awards here. What sort of really hit it for me was the combat and how sort of fun some of the boss battles were. The inclusion of music, it had a lot of its own sort of created songs that they introduced, and there was a few licensed songs in there. So it's quite fun, and yeah, the sort of mishmash of the sort of challenge of it as well it's quite a hard game to master. You know, it's quite easy to play. It does a fairly good tutorial and then gets you up to snuff. But it's getting them high scores that is part of the challenge. As with many of the sort of Devil May Cry games and many of the hack and slash. But yeah, I enjoyed my time with it. I think I spent about sort of 12, 13 hours, so it's not one that doesn't sort of outstay its welcome. I mean, a game like this you wouldn't really want to be playing for sort of 30 plus. I'm sure that would get quite tedious. So it's sort of its length is pretty spot on, to be honest. And like I say, the combat is where it's at. You get sort of lots of like different abilities you can use. It also seems that there's some extra modes on there that I didn't play. Sort of like some arcade modes where you can sort of try different things. There's like a sort of tower, a sort of increasing tower mode where sort of difficulty goes up, like a gauntlet thing. But I haven't played those, but there is definitely a bit of replayability in this game. There's costumes and stuff to collect. So, yeah, yeah, like I say, the combat and the music is where it's at, and that rhythm. It chucks a lot of different enemies at you, and there's sort of all different ways to take them down, and it's just sort of remembering what does what and trying to mix and mash that and keep your scores high. Like I say, it's a fun game to play, but it's quite hard to master. But yeah, I enjoyed my time with it. It was a nice little surprise. It came out of nowhere. I think it was shadow dropped, I believe. I was a bit late to the party. But I've got to say, it's very much up my alley. You know, rock music. I mean, the weapon the main character uses is a guitar. So, you know, being an axe man myself, it really was one for me. The only downside I say to it is, you know, like the story and the characters are okay. There's no one. I can't even remember the main character's name now, so that'll tell you how that sort of story and characters are. They're pretty forgettable. But no, I enjoyed my time. Enjoyed my time with it. Pretty damn good. And for a freebie the shadow dropped, I'll give this a gold. Hi-Fi Rush. Go out and check it out, guys.